The Dalai Lama attended the first National Chinese People's Congress, which included 10 seats for the Tibetan delegation. He was impressed by Mao and felt a great affinity with many of the egalitarian principles of communism. However, at their last meeting, Mao wasted no time in giving his true opinion of Tibet and its future under Chinese rule. As the Dalai Lama left, Mao turned to him and said, "Religion is poison." The Dalai Lama returned home. News reached him that the Chinese authorities in eastern Tibet were confiscating lands belonging to monasteries and redistributing them amongst themselves. The situation deteriorated. Fighting broke out between the Chinese army and Tibetan freedom fighters, and refugees began pouring into Lhasa. In the midst of this tense atmosphere, the Dalai Lama still had to take his final monastic exams, the main focus of which were public debates. Debate is a rigorous discussion of Buddha's teachings. Everything is challenged. Debate is an ancient tradition within Buddhism, which is still practiced today, although the monks, and now nuns, are somewhat more vigorous in their style than they were in the 1950s. These monks are arguing over their personal interpretation of Buddhist texts. The skill is in arguing and using logic and your own analysis to back up your points. They are punctuated with claps to the hand. The respondent must then reply. The culmination of the Dalai Lama's 18 years of study was an examination for a doctorate in Buddhist philosophy. It started with debates at 3 of the largest monasteries in Tibet. Drepung Monastery had 10,000 resident monks. 8,000 of them were squeezed into the square to see the Dalai Lama as he arrived with his retinue to take his first exam. The monastery owned local estates and had some 20,000 tied peasants who worked the land and paid them taxes. The revenue paid for the prayer sessions and festivals which dominated monastic life. Feeding the monks for big events, like the examinations, was a huge, if somewhat rushed, process. The young monks run down from the cookhouse carrying huge tubs of sampa for their brethren who are sitting in the square. Sampa is roasted barley flour mixed with yak butter, tea or water to make dough. To celebrate His Holiness's presence, the monks are also given prayer scarves, tea and money.
I'm somewhere here, somewhere among these, the second row or third row I should be. And this is a Goman side. These are the government officials. Now His Holiness is offering the debate to the 2 abbots.
During his early life, he had to go to China and he had to go to India, and he had so many things to attend. So then he did not have time to study.
Oh, now this about top scholar, Mongolian, and also when he asked question very rapidly. So a bit more nervous. So I have had little opportunity to think how to trick to him. One top scholar is very rapidly, you see, putting question. Then no time, you see, how to pretend or how to defend like that. So now this is my turn, debate.
Of course, we have received a lot of teaching from His Holiness, and we know he is a very great scholar. But he was not joined in the monastic debate. We thought he may not be very sharp in the in the debate. But for the first time, we saw when he was examined by the abbots, he was brilliant and absolutely sharp, equal with those who are debating in the monastery for lifetime. And the abbots find it quite difficult to debate with him.
The next exam was at Sera Monastery. The whole of the Dalai Lama's government travelled with him, allowing him to consult with them about the growing tension in Lhasa. At the same time, he had to prepare for the next series of debates. But the abbots each had their own individual style of arguing.
In Sera Monastery, you see, when you debate with the opponent, good scholar, then their answer is something logical or something, you see, they valid, meaningful. In Sera Monastery, one abbot, not that much scholar, not that top. So you see, from my side, you see, the preparation, if answer come this way, yes, this is the way to argue. If this way, if answer has come this kind of answer, then yes, already prepared. And his answer, unexpected answer. So then my tutor noticed that, then he very kindly stopped, now finish. Okay. That's tremendous relief.
The last of preliminary exams was some distance from Lhasa, at Ganden Monastery. Ironically, the examinations at Ganden proved to be a brief period of respite for the Dalai Lama. Thousands more refugees had fled the fighting in the east and arrived in Lhasa. A huge number are now camped around the outskirts of the city. Tensions with the occupying Chinese, who'd been in Tibet for about 9 years, were high. There were food shortages in Lhasa and rumours about massacres in eastern Tibet, and also rumours about the destruction of sacred sites. Meanwhile, the Dalai Lama still had his final exam to take. The Dalai Lama returned to Lhasa and continued to prepare for his final exam. Amidst increasingly disturbing reports of Chinese atrocities, he attempted to concentrate on his studies. He took solace in Buddha's teachings that one's enemy is one's greatest teacher, and to have compassion for all sentient beings. The final exam was arranged to take place at the same time as the Mulam New Year festival. There were 30,000 monks in the city, and pilgrims were arriving from all over Tibet. The Jokang temple was full to bursting. The cabinet, civil officials, and all the senior abbots and monks were present.
At that time, things were very tense. On the one hand, a very solemn and grand ceremony was taking place. On the other hand, we were in a very dangerous and tense situation.
There are a lot of rumors about danger to his security, and the threat perception was very high. And therefore, it was a very tight security arrangements used to be there, and that was a bit annoying. And that was not a consonance with the monastic atmosphere. So a lot of soldiers with guns and very attentive and with walkie-talkies. These are not familiar with the people. So that was a tense and also the joyful. These are going together.
Gun emplacements were built. There were Chinese carrying rifles patrolling the rooftops opposite. Everyone, government officials, the clergy, the people, were there for the religious function of the 13th, but they saw clearly the Chinese soldiers walking around on the rooftops.
I was involved in organizing the event. In this emergency situation, there was nothing we could do. We asked some of the Hmong officials to disguise themselves as ordinary people and mingle with the public and to act like spies.
On the one hand, the ordinary people and the aristocrats were all dressed up in their finest. On the other, right next door, the Chinese were making elaborate military preparations, with soldiers carrying rifles as if they might attack at any moment. It was unbelievable that these two extraordinary situations could be happening at the same time. The position between the Chinese and the Tibetans was becoming irreconcilable. It was an incredible situation that was unfolding. If you had told an outsider, they wouldn't believe you. But that's how it was.
One aspect, the whole atmosphere is so tense. Many people actually felt whether this big gathering can take place or not, because it's so much tense. But then everything go very smoothly. So everybody very happy. My final examination, successful. I think very successful. And also, I myself, from the corner of my mind, another thing is, now no more any lesson.
The Dalai Lama returned to the Noble Inca with his full retinue, but this time he was accompanied by armed guards. Little did he know that this 1,000-year-old ceremonial procession through Lhasa would be his last. The Chinese Governor-General of Tibet invited Dalai Lama to see a dance troupe at the Chinese military headquarters. In the name of dispensing with formality, the Chinese requested that he attend with unarmed bodyguards. Worried that a refusal would worsen the fragile situation, the Dalai Lama accepted, but the news soon spread.
The Tibetan people came pouring into the Noble Inca, and their spokesmen forced their way into our official meetings. So His Holiness didn't go. This meant that any communication between the Chinese and the Tibetans had completely broken down. As this had happened, everybody felt it wasn't safe for His Holiness to stay. You could never tell what the Chinese might do. So everyone wanted him to leave as soon as possible. Although that was what everyone was thinking and what everybody wanted, no one dared say it out loud. We were all terrified.
The Dalai Lama received news that the Chinese were planning to attack the crowd surrounding the Noble Inca and bomb the building. Convinced that if he left, the people would be saved, he decided he had to leave.
Of course, I think topmost in my mind is fear, sadness, and almost like the feeling of desperate. And also leaving some of my close friends, sweepers, or some monks who look after temples or the libraries in Nulinga, and including my dog. So as a human level, very sad, one factor. Then also, several thousand Tibetan, you see, suppose different Noble Inca already gathered there. So that also additional worry. If something happens, then thousands of people will die. Then also, my own life, there is danger. One person's sort of future but future of Tibet also is related. So therefore, anxiety, fear, little doubt, hesitation, and sadness, all mixed, very much mixed.
That night, the Dalai Lama escaped from the Noble Inca, disguised as a Tibetan soldier.
I had an indescribable feeling. On the one hand, I was exultant that His Holiness was able to leave. On the other hand, I was very sad when I saw him. Unlike the usual protocol and fanfare, he left wearing an ordinary brown uniform, carrying a rifle like a soldier.
Then next day, reach southern Tibet. Then fear of my life, then no longer. Then we have no hesitation to criticize about our Chinese brothers and sisters. While in Lhasa, although sometimes we criticize, but from one corner of our mind, be careful, be careful, be careful, or that kind of sort of situation. Then as soon as we reach southern Tibet, the free from Chinese forces, we get some extraordinary feeling now, freedom.
2 weeks later, after an arduous journey through the Himalayas, the Dalai Lama reached safety in northern India.
That morning, around dawn, they began shelling the Noble Inca. At around 9 or 10, I went to Chokpuri Hill, to the defensive position I had been assigned to monitor. When I looked towards the Potala, I saw there was a huge fire in the eastern wing. Near the account section, a huge fire.
The canal bombardment started from the bottom of the hills upwards. That was followed by the rat-a-tat-tat of the machine gun fire. It was relentless. In any case, eventually, even the Zulakan was taken over and completely looted. Everything except for the George statue and the Sungze chapel, it was left like an empty shell. Everything else was destroyed. It was taken over by the Chinese soldiers and turned into, what's the word in Chinese? A trote. We weren't allowed in because it was turned into a military barracks and heavily guarded.
Then around 4 or 5 in the evening, when I looked across at the Ramakang ferry crossing, I saw large numbers of Tibetan horsemen, foot soldiers and ordinary people. Many of them were from the Tibetan volunteer force. Then the relentless bombardment began. In the dust and smoke, I saw people and horses falling. The intense bombardment went on for about an hour or 2. That day, over 1,000 of our people were killed. I saw it all with my very own eyes.
The Tibetan resistance, made up of freedom fighters and monks who had taken up arms for the first time in their lives, were no match for the Chinese army. They surrendered after 3 days. The Tibetan government was abolished, and the Chinese systematically began to destroy Tibetan society and its Buddhist culture and traditions. Monasteries were looted and scriptures burnt. Nuns and monks were forced to denounce their faith. They were also made to discard their robes and grow their hair. They were even forced to marry each other. Class resentment amongst the peasants over Tibet's feudal system was ruthlessly exploited. The government officials and aristocrats had their long hair shaved off, were imprisoned or forced to do menial jobs. They were subjected to public interrogation sessions, many resulting in death. the Indian government granted the Dalai Lama political asylum, and 80,000 refugees escaped from Tibet to join him. He has lived here in Dharamsala, known as Little Lhasa, ever since. The Dalai Lama appealed to the United Nations, calling on China to respect the human rights of Tibetans and their desire for self-determination. Despite 3 resolutions adopted by the UN General Assembly, the fact that thousands of monasteries were destroyed and hundreds of thousands of Tibetans were imprisoned in labor camps, the international community refused to intervene. It's tragic that Tibetans have lost their homeland, and with no tangible international intervention. But coming here, looking around, one can see that despite everything, Tibetans retain their sense of national identity, their culture, and their pride.
Looking at these pictures that you have here in front of me, it's entirely a different world. And it was, to me, it's very sad. For instance, like my grandfather wanted Tibet. I get very emotional to talk about Tibet, you know. My grandfather wanted Tibet to be with the outside world and to join the United Nations, to educate the Tibetans outside and to be with the modern world. But his visions and his wishes, and also his 13th Dalai Lama and the 14th Dalai Lama had a wish that we must have contact with the international world. But unfortunately, from our own side, we were so blind and we knew nothing of the outside world. We were just so engrossed in our little pond, you know, so we knew nothing, what was happening to the world, what could happen, and so we lost our country.
The Dalai Lama advocates a middle way, which means he wants Tibetans to move back to Tibet, even if they become a minority within China, but a minority with a degree of self-rule. He remains determined that the dialogue between the Chinese and the Tibetans remains peaceful and positive.
Middle approach is the best. So present Chinese government policy regarding different minorities, particularly regarding Tibet, is not healthy or not good for long run. So kind of new opinions as a result of better awareness now coming. So therefore, basically, I'm hopeful. Thank you.
Phuntsog Tsering escaped to India in 1959. He is now the Dalai Lama's personal tailor. Shuo Lobsang Darji spent 15 years in a Chinese prison in Lhasa. He escaped to India in 1985 and became the Chief Justice Commissioner for the Tibetan government in exile. Usha Nawang Tashi escaped to India in 1959. He retired as a Chum teacher in 1990. The Venerable Jampa Sultram served 20 years in a Chinese prison in Lhasa. He escaped in 1980 and worked at Dalai Lama's private office. The Venerable Tenzin Chonyi Tara escaped from Tibet in 1959 and worked at the Dalai Lama's private office until he retired in 2003. Jampa Chodin was forced to give up being a nun and marry a monk. She escaped to India in 1984. Professor Samdong Rinpoche escaped to India in 1959. He is now the Prime Minister of the Tibetan government in exile. Namgyal Takla left Tibet in 1956. She's lived in Switzerland, America, and now India, working for the Tibetan government in exile.